Ready to drive your career, not just ride along? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm Simone E. Morris, your host and career strategist, here to give you the roadmap. Each week, we're cutting through the noise with strategies, stories, and insights to get you back in control. Your career clarity starts right here. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the new season of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I am so excited for today's episode. I want you all to meet Fadjanie Cadet. She is a seasoned HR and inclusion strategist who transforms how companies engage and elevate talent. Can't wait to hear about this because I do some work around inclusion as well. You know this audience. With her leadership experience at Forrester, Wayfair, and LEK Consulting, she partners with executives to strengthen culture and unlock business performance through empathy-driven change. As a self-proclaimed Chief Change Experience Officer, Fadjanie bridges business realities with the human side of work, drawing from both lived experience and data-driven insights. She's the author of In First Place, which focuses on supporting first-generation professionals. She's spoken at major conferences, including SHRM and WorkHuman Live, helping leaders move from intention to action in building inclusive, high-performing workplaces. Fadjanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Simone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today.
Awesome. I'm excited to jump right in. So tell us what we didn't get from the bio. How did you get to where you are today? Like, were you, when you were growing up, you wanted to be an inclusion strategist?
That's such a great question. I don't know if that was even language that existed then, right? So no, but in terms of background, so I am a proud first generation Haitian American. So born from immigrant parents, in an urban area in the outside of the greater Boston area, neighborhoods. And I think one of the things that was rooted in sort of my upbringing was resilience and hard work and making something out of nothing or very few, right? And so I've always been focused on doing great work, doing the right work with integrity, and bringing others along the way, right? I think coming from an immigrant background, community has always been the base and an anchor. And when I started my career, I wasn't always sure that this was the work that I wanted to do. But I think because I've always been in the HR and talent space and I've had proximity to the employee experience lifecycle and processes and policies and systems, that I always say that I've informally have always been doing inclusion work, right? Just coming from a place of lived experience and proximity with the tasks. But formally transitioned to doing that work with the words in the title, right? This new language, inclusion, equity, diversity. Later on, when I realized that this was something that I didn't want to just be a part of my work, but really core to who I am, how I show up, and a focus in everything that I do. I would say that holistically, my work sits at the intersection of culture, inclusion, organizational development, hence sort of the Chief Change Experience title in that space. And so I think the root definitely comes from just my upbringing, right, as being a first generation American, and wanting to lift others as I climbed.
Awesome. All right. I definitely want to know more about that as we share some similar passions based on just the word inclusion. Let me ask you, when you were growing up, what did you want to be?
Yeah. So interestingly, I think when I was a child, like adolescence, I used to say a pediatrician. And because I love children, but I also think that that's because, again, growing up in an immigrant household, right? I think a lot of immigrant first generation professionals sort of share this experience in that your parents come to this country with this idea that they want you to be successful, for you to have security, right? And financial stability. And their sort of exposure to what that looks like from a job perspective is rather limited, right? It's
Yeah.
either healthcare, you're a lawyer, a doctor, or be an engineer, so to
Yeah.
speak. And so I think the pediatrician thing was something that I said because I thought I had to, right? And then when I started getting ready to apply for schools, I really had the business bug. I wanted to have a be aware of the corporate landscape, to have a corporate job, to think big picture about strategy, to be able to communicate in the language of money, right?
Yeah.
Which seemed like a good foundation. And I actually started my career thinking I was going to be in accounting. Again, I think that was something that was sort of uh, created out of this. If you're an accountant, it's very specific. There are paths, you can do it and secure. But that really wasn't where my passion was. My passion was for the people. And so that's where I realized that I could still be in business, but in the business of human capital, right? And culture, and employee experience. And that happened thankfully while I was still in school so that I could build my career and start it in this space. But as you can imagine, it took a little while for the family to catch on to this different path.
Absolutely. I can imagine because I'm also a first generation student. My family is from Jamaica. So, I can totally relate to the experiences and perhaps some of your journey. There may be more similarities if we decided to explore further. So,
Yes.
yeah, this show is about being in the driver's seat for your career. And what that means is you're very hands-on intentional, although it does sound like you have been intentional from deciding that you wanted your focus to be on human development, change management, change experience, etc., that you're very intentional from college. My experience is very different. So I want to know, when did you realize that you needed to take ownership and be in the driver's seat for your career?
Yeah, I think there are two particular moments that come to mind for me. As I mentioned, from a job title perspective, and now that I think about it, these moments, it's actually one big moment. From a job title perspective, formerly I didn't have these words in my job title. And I knew that this was the work that moved me, that I wanted to be doing and focusing on. And I was getting a taste here and there, but I wanted to really go full force. And so that meant transitioning jobs,
Mhm.
right? And finding the opportunity. Thankfully, a recruiter had reached out to me on LinkedIn at the time and said, "Hey, I have this diversity and inclusion leadership role at this company for you." And I thought, this is perfect. I have an opportunity. This is where I can really see if this is a match. And I started this role, and I would say almost immediately realized that it was not a great fit for
Mm,
me.
mm,
And in that moment, there were so many feelings that I had. Um, Obviously, like disappointment, a bit of confusion, but also what happened was a bit of shame around my ability to make decisions, career decisions for myself,
mm,
right? And um, if I chose willingly to join this organization, can I trust myself to choose the right next thing? Right?
mm,
Like, do I have it in me? And that was something that I really, really struggled with, in navigating how do I rebuild and regain trust in myself to make decisions for myself as it relates to my career and my professional growth. And so that was a pivotal moment for me because I had to make a decision. And at the same time, I was finding out that I was going to be a mom for the first time.
mm,
And so all of the uncertainty and the big emotions that come with that, were coupled. And ultimately, I made the decision, I need to change jobs. I'm not happy here. I'm also approaching the third trimester of my pregnancy, and I know how important it is for me to have paid parental leave, and what does that mean, and what are the risks. And it was such a tug and pull.
mm,
But ultimately, I decided I had to be in the driver's seat, not just for me, but for now my unborn child, right? And like, what was the legacy, the stories, the experiences that I was going to be able to talk about after this. And so I decided I'm going to do something that is a little bit risky. I'm going to go back out in the job market as someone who is about to give birth in just a few months and has only been in this organization for about a year, and see if I can make something work and lead with authenticity and clarity. Yes, I made this decision. No, it is not the right fit for me for X, Y, and Z reasons. Oh, and yes, I am also expecting my first child. And when recruiters were asking, what questions do you have? My questions were culturally, what can you tell me about this organization that I can't read online or see on your website?
Mm,
Right? Like those kinds of things that come up later, right? And also, do you tell me about your parental leave policy? Is there a probation period? What does that look like? Because here's my situation, right? Legally, I know recruiters couldn't ask, but this is what I needed to know for me in order to make an informed decision moving
mm,
forward. And
mm,
so that was a very scary time for me. And ultimately, I did end up changing jobs and starting a new role in my third trimester, and everything worked out, and it was a great experience. But that was such a pivotal moment for me in saying, like, you could be the CEO of your own career,
mm.
that any sort of working relationship has to be mutually beneficial, and that I am empowered to ask the right questions, right? And to be very clear about what it is that I need in order to be successful here, just as much as, they're looking to make sure that I'm a match. It also has to be a fit for me.
Yep.
Um, and I think going through that exercise um, built my trust in myself, right? And that I can make these decisions. It's okay to make mistakes. Not every job is going to be the right job, but if I take time to reflect on what it is that I need, and the more time that I spend anchoring myself in my core values, right, then I can trust myself to do what is right for me in that moment, and that might change from moment to moment. But that moment, that experience of changing jobs to a company that didn't feel like the right fit, and then having to make a decision to go back out to a market when my self trust was low and my circumstances were a bit tricky, has been a pivotal moment for me in my career.
Yeah, thanks for transparently sharing that experience. I understand fully just, the questioning and the potential shame because, uh, and not just in immigrant families, but perhaps in families and
Yeah.
also in academia, you are taught a certain, a rule in terms of getting the job, how long you stay, all that.
Yes.
And so now that's all being questioned, and you honed in on something very instrumental that I want to take a look at a bit more is how do you rebuild trust in yourself? Because I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I was in corporate America and very unhappy with my job, I didn't want to leave because there was a lot of perception,
Mm-hmm.
concern about the perception of leaving a very, well-paid job, benefits, access to certain things, and it made me second guess my decision making and perhaps stay longer than I would have wanted to stay. But interestingly, I hear you saying, I knew that it wasn't a good fit, and despite that noise, I moved anyway. And also to be able to transparently say that you're in your third trimester, that's a big thing around psychological safety and having the trust to say that to a recruiter or even to a potential employer. And so I wonder a couple things. So let me just start with one question.
Yeah.
How did you prepare yourself? What resources can you share with our audience if someone is sitting in a similar position, which is a pivotal moment for them, and they've got to really bet hard on themselves in order to
Mm-hmm.
leap? What
Mm-hmm.
tell us succinctly, some resources that would be helpful to feed in to build yourself up to make such a decision.
Yes, that's such a great question. I've reflected on this. The first thing, and these are all things that I still do today, right? In sort of navigating change and making decisions, career decisions. The first is, I think, to make a list of all of the decisions, the pivotal moments in your career that have led up to this point, both positive and negative,
Mhm.
right? And list those on one side of the page. And on the other side, what was the impact? Right? What happened as a result of? And the reason that I say include the negative things, because those things that didn't necessarily go as anticipated, the impact sometimes is that you learn something, right? There was an aha moment, something that you know you'll never do again, do differently, or more time that you had to invest in a thing. So really look at the cause and effect, because I think that sometimes in these moments of uncertainty, there is a likelihood to sort of spiral in everything is going to go badly. And sometimes taking a moment to pause and remind ourselves that that hasn't happened, and that when you did spiral or things started to go awry, that you were able to pivot, learn, grow, adjust, right? Those sort of reminders I think are really important. And so that, like, writing things down and reflecting and visualizing that on paper, I think is a critical tip and like resource. The other thing I would say is to leverage your community, right? Like those mentors, the sponsors that you've had, people that you've worked with, old managers, right? Even friends and family, people who know you very well, and really lean on them, talk to them. I always say that sometimes when we forget who we are, it takes our community to remind us who we are.
Mm.
And so really, really sort of leveraging your community when you feel a little bit shaky to say, well, you know what, Simone, you've been in a spot like this before, and I remember how you came out swinging,
Mm.
right? Or that's not something that I would worry about because this is who you really are. And then the last thing is also the same way that you write down those moments in your career, write down what are your top three core values. Who are you? What are the things that are incredibly important to you? And I think looking at collectively those three things, the list of the moments and the impact, anchoring yourself in your community,
Mm.
and anchoring yourself in your core values are three resources or tips, right, that I think have been incredibly valuable to me in navigating shifts and what I would offer to other people who are thinking through some tough challenges.
Yeah, that's terrific. I would say that, audience, when you're thinking about the community, I would sprinkle in discernment because some people,
Yeah.
you can have this community, but there are some people in communities that are risk averse. And so they want you to stay safe. So I would say to balance out community, to be really thoughtful and to really go inward to think about what you want and balance that with the community. Because, I remember wanting to just quit my job and having some sprinkles of doubt sprinkled in from community. So I want you to be mindful. I think community, and you mentioned the mentors, the sponsors, which I think is a excellent guidance there. But also be mindful of what people want and how they see you and what they want for
Mhm.
you in your career. And if you balance that with what Fadjanie is talking about with those core values, it's a nice, balance. So you really have to really bolster yourself up so that you're strong and you using the data points that you're getting in, but then you in the driver's seat are the final decision maker of how you move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're so right in terms of discernment, right? That's critically important. And I would say that it's not necessarily always a bad thing to hear the risk of hear from the risk averse
Hmm.
folks in your community either, because I've found that when you are getting both perspectives or diversity of perspectives, right? We talk about this in the work that we do. Um, it creates those aha moments. And I found myself in conversations with maybe folks who are more risk averse and thinking, yeah, that doesn't sound like me, right? Like, I don't know if I agree with that. And sometimes that sort of acts as reassurance and affirmation also.
Mm, good point. I wonder, Fajani, I want to make sure I ask you this. What is your formula for owning your career and advancing in your career? What are the key ingredients
Mhm.
that's necessary? And audience, we know that everybody has a different formula, but I like for you to hear from different leaders that we bring to the show. What is their formula for owning their careers?
Okay, so I have a sort of a three-part formula here.
Okay.
Um, the first part is that hard work alone is not enough. And that is something that I had to learn over the course of my career. I think if we go back to our roots that we share,
Hmm.
right, with being first gen professionals, I think a lot of the seeds that were planted early was that you work hard, your head's down, and you just do the work. And if you do the work, then you will be rewarded, seen, compensated, all of those things. And I think for anyone who has experienced the world of work knows that that is not true, right?
That's
Especially
why
if
I'm
we're talking,
smiling.
yeah,
I'm
right?
smiling hard, Audie. Right.
Particularly on the white collar, so to speak, side of things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think I watched my parents sort of navigate life's unknowns, right, with just relentless hard work, pushing through obstacles without complaint. Um, Keeping their head and with the idea that if we keep our heads down and we just do the work, everything will work
Yeah.
out for us eventually. And I recognized as I was going through my career that in my world, keeping your head down could mean missed opportunities,
Mhm.
right? That visibility is just as important, if not more important, than the hard work. And so it requires hard work, yes, but also visibility, also self advocacy, also strategic positioning,
Mhm.
right? All of those things are just as critical, right, as effort. And so that's the first thing I will say. The other thing is redefining success,
Mhm.
right? And so again, if I go back to, I think the seeds that were planted, success has been for a lot of us and still is synonymous with financial security, right? Money, a steady paycheck, good benefits,
Mhm.
little to no risk, right? Just like we're coasting, everything is simple. And while I think for me, that was the approach of my parents, and that gave us a really beautiful foundation. I also had to realize that it can also mean taking chances. That success could also mean following your passion, right?
Mhm.
Like doing the thing that maybe doesn't is not, doctor, lawyer, engineer, but really motivates you, because that's when you're going to show up as your best self, and that's when you're going to be innovative. So taking risks, uh, thinking about what it means to have work be something more than just a survival tactic or a tool, prioritizing setting boundaries that align with your well-being, right? Like having all of those be a part of the success definition, I think is really important. So we have hard work is alone is not enough, redefine success. And then I would say the last one, and this is a big one, is balancing gratitude with ambition,
Mhm.
because I think another sort of seed that can be planted for a lot of folks, or at least I know for me, was I was raised to be very deeply grateful as a first gen professional for every opportunity. Um, but excessive gratitude can sometimes hold you back,
Mhm.
right? For asking for more, for what you deserve, for being seen in places and being invited to where you may not have been. And so I had to learn, particularly as a first gen professional, particularly as a Black woman in the workplace, um, that I could be both grateful um, and advocate for myself. Right, that gratitude and ambition were not mutually exclusive, that I can appreciate an opportunity and how far I've come, but also demand more, right? Demand what I deserve.
Mhm.
And so I would say that those are the three things. If I had, what's my philosophy? Hard work alone isn't enough, right? We have to advocate. I think um, redefine success to mean all of the things that are required for you to truly feel whole and show up as your best self, and that you can be grateful and also demand, what you deserve, what is owed to you, right? As well, that it's not one or the other.
Powerful. I love all of that. It makes so much sense. My goodness. I have a lot to add, but this is your form. I love what you're talking about because I know about the hard work. I know
Yeah.
about the hard work, and I learned the hard way audience because I was sitting at my desk when I should have been in the coffee room or at the water cooler or at a social event doing the hard work that was not netting the
Yes.
results that I sought. So I'm nodding my head in agreement because earlier in my career, that is the experience that I had. That's what I was taught. And so
Yep.
it's hard to shift your mindset if you're not intentional and do the work to shift the mindset. I still believe very strongly in hard work, but now it's hard work plus, 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 as opposed to just
Hmm.
hard work for the results. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I love that. When you think about your career body of work, let me ask you, Fadjanie,
Yeah.
what would a title be as you think about the lessons learned before earlier in the episode, you gave us that exercise of looking at all the experiences we've had and the impact of those experiences. I wonder when you think about all those impacts in your career body of work, if you were able to sum it up into one title, what would that be?
In this exact moment, what's coming to me is unlearning to rise,
Mm,
right? Or unlearning to thrive. Because I think we often are hyper focused on all of the new things that we sort of add to our toolbox over the course of our careers. But we have to remember, I think it's equally important to remember the seeds that were planted, right? And sort of our foundation and what that does to either propel or hold us back from greatness. And so um, and passion and innovation and contentedness, all of those things. And so I would say unlearning to rise, right? Like what are all of the things that we carry with us, the seeds that were planted, those pivotal moments where we lost trust in ourselves and had to fight our way back through it. Um, how does that shape sort of who we become,
hmm.
right? And how we sort of let go of those things that are on our back so that we can fly. So I'd say unlearning to rise.
I love that. I love that. I love that so much. So thank you for sharing that. I was thinking something about the what we talked about earlier in the episode where you were talking about just rebuilding trust in yourself, and it
Mhm.
still just stays with me so powerful. But the unlearning piece is very important because each of us carry baggage or
Yeah.
things that can get in our way, rocks that can get in our way. So we need to do the work in order to be in the driver's seat and to get ahead in your career. Any parting thoughts that you want to leave with the audience today?
I would just say that I know particular in any season, taking risks. I know we talked about risk earlier also. In any season, taking risk is a gamble. And it's scary and it's not always where we go first. And I think particularly in this season, with all of the change and disruption that's happening,
Mm,
both from a corporate perspective, from a social, right, political landscape, there's from a technological perspective, there's so much disruption happening. And it's even scarier, the thought
mm,
of taking risks, right? Or at least for me. And I would say that I've like to think of risks as an investment, right? Like every risk is an investment in my career, in my future self, right? In the legacy that I'm leaving for my family. And that I always, when we talk about like risk versus reward and that analysis, I always say it's take the risk because it's greater than the risk of never having taken the risk, right? Um, it's like they say better to have loved and lost, better to have done and failed, right? Or have, I would say better language, better to have done and learned something
yeah.
than to not have learned anything, right? And so that would be what I offer folks, particularly now, those who are maybe navigating a season of expansion
Mm,
and uncertainty. That if you go back to that list, the impact is always greater than the event,
mm,
and so to focus on that.
mm. I wonder, since you brought up disruption, what people should be thinking about in terms of owning their career or aspirations to advance in their career from a change standpoint with all this disruption going. What
Mhm.
would you say is a priority that our listeners should focus on?
I would say don't compartmentalize who you are and what you bring to the table, right? And so a lot of times we have a very like binary mindset in how we think about the world and the world that we see, but also in how we think about ourselves. I am this or I do this. And what that could be very limiting. And I think particularly in moments of disruption, we have to challenge ourselves to not have be, fixed in how we think about who we are and what we offer. Yes, I am a mother. Yes, I am a friend, a daughter. Yes, I am a DEI leader, but I'm also an organizational development leader. I'm also a change management specialist. I'm also a project manager. I'm also a learning and development architect, right? Think about, remove the titles, so to speak, and think about the impact. Again, what impact have you made? What initiatives have you brought forward? Whose lives have you changed and how? What influence have you left? Focus on that and help that lead you into thinking about what's this next phase of your career. But don't compartmentalize who we are or who you are, particularly in the season of change, right? Like I think for me, having had DEI titles, it's very easy to be influenced into thinking that you can't do or haven't done anything other than what the world perceives to be DEI work, right? But DEI work is organizational development work, right? It is leadership development. It is culture activation. It is organizational effectiveness, right? It's all of those things. And so look at the wholeness of who you are, what you offer, the impact and influence that you've had in organizations, and let that lead you into what comes next.
Love that. Own who you are, the multifaceted, all those identities. And what I was thinking when you were talking, Fadjanie, is that, uh, stop playing small so others can be comfortable. And I'll leave it at that.
Yes. Yes.
I'll leave it at that. But those are powerful words to share, and it's been a great time chatting with you on the podcast today. Can you tell our listeners if they'd like to stay connected with you, how they can do so? What's the best way?
Yes. So thank you first, Simone, for this amazing conversation. I really, really appreciated the time with you and sharing some personal stories and insights with the other listeners. To get in touch with me, you can either connect with me, Fadjanie Cadet, on LinkedIn, follow or connect, or my website, meettheccxo.com. The CCXO stands for Chief Change Experience Officer. So meettheccxo.com or Fadjanie Cadet on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Power of Owning Your Career podcast.
Thank you.
That's it for today's empowering episode. I'm Simone E. Morris, and I want you to remember that you are indeed the architect of your career. Share this episode if it sparked something in you. Subscribe wherever you listen, and find more resources at SimoneMorrisEnterprises.org. Keep practicing career ownership, and I'll be right here with you next week for more transformation.